I'm excited to see where this goes. So just to kick us off, like, both give us a little bit of an intro, and we'll start with Emma.
I'm Emma. I'm 35 years old. Have a wife, a kid. I'm a streamer, full-time streamer. And I don't sleep enough because I stream nights and I have a kid who wakes me up at 6 in the morning. But I'm really happy to be here. I think it's a conversation that is very important. And like Dave said, we have a bit of a pre-chat where we talked about the importance of communication and free to talk about things. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to answer questions when the time comes. And I really enjoy Dave's energy. Syn is a really good friend of mine. So I'm just here to have fun.
Awesome. It's going to be great. Syn?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. I hope my microphone is working because sometimes Zoom is a little finicky with that. But I think you can hear me blabbering. So that's
There's
good.
a little bit of crackle.
So I'm Syn. I'm a little bit of crackle.
Like occasionally.
We're going to figure that out. Damn. But we'll figure it out. But yeah, I'm a part-time streamer, full-time mental health advocate as Dave. So, which is why I'm really happy to be here, especially with Emma, because Emma is one of my dearest friends. And I just wanted to talk about topics that are important and that need to be talked about. And I think we're going to have a really great time today. At least I hope so.
And if anyone's just coming in for the first time and wants to know who the hell I am, I'm Dave. That's about it. I'm just some dude that shouts at a camera and tries to incorporate conversations of mental health. And as I said before, I'm a very, very, very serious streamer that never does anything zany or out there. I have bipolar disorder, so I just literally go with the flow with that. And sometimes that means I'm completely down on myself. Other times it means I think that I'm indestructible. So we just turn up with whatever's rolling on that particular day. So, Emma, obviously the kind of prime topic that we're going to be focusing on today is the fact that you're at the early stages of your transition. And when we spoke a few weeks ago, you said obviously that's a stage within the transition journey that is not very spoken about. But I kind of would like to go a little bit further back than that first, if that's okay, and just we'll just basically ask a kind of at what stage. Well, talk us through kind of like your journey with your gender identity from your early age, like, you know, when you were younger. When were the first kind of signs for you that, okay, I don't feel this is my gender, or I don't feel
right.
That, maybe even it wasn't even about gender, you know, maybe it was at the time I just don't feel right, you know. What was the origin of all of that?
Yeah, so this is the when did you find out you were trans question that comes up a lot as well, right? And the easy answer is I've always known, right? I've always known this, and that's the answer that you're going to get from most trans people because it's the easy answer. And I know a lot of people did know from a very young age. I grew up in a household that did not allow me to question any of these things. So while there was excuse me, a bit sick today. There were things that, looking back, there were a lot of signs that that I was not who I was told I was, you know, by my parents, by society. But in, you know, since I didn't have the freedom to think about those things, my family was very homophobic, very racist. It was a very difficult household to be anything other than normal, quote unquote. There were things that I learned to ignore until I recently, I moved out. I'm originally from Portugal, which is not the easiest place to be LGBT. It's definitely not one of the worst, but it's not one of the best. And I moved to the Netherlands about 10 years ago, which is, for the better or the worst, a very open country. And I've started feeling a bit more comfortable with exploring those questions. And I identified as non-binary for a few years, and it was only after I started streaming and I started. I have a community that's focused on mental health and LGBT discussions and normalization. So it was not until I actually started having these conversations with people. I've had people who came out as transgender in my stream. And that's when I got the courage to actually go back into that self-discovery journey and actually, accept something that I knew, but I didn't for a long time didn't want to give a name to.
Okay. And when was that? Sorry, in time, was that recent? Quite recent.
That was last October.
Okay.
So it's all very recently. And one of the reasons why I decided to come out publicly as transgender was, like you said, because I think when a lot of people think of transgender, they think of the end of the journey.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of visibility for the journey itself. And we have lots of lovely transgender people telling us how it went. But of course, 10 years later,
yes,
talking about the journey. And I think it's important for people in my situation and people who are privileged enough to be safe enough to talk about it, to discuss the journey as it's happening, because there's a lot of difficult things, but there's also a lot of beautiful things, especially when you have supportive people with you. And there's always so many questions, because a lot of people are afraid to ask them. So when you open yourself to say, this is me, and they can see the things that I'm not comfortable with, the things that I want to change, but also the things that I'm growing to love, it becomes a lot easier to just be open about it. But I'm definitely not. It's not my final version of myself. It never is. Right, but I feel like I've made a lot of progress, and I feel like the more I think back to my history, to the things that I felt weren't quite right, the more the pieces fall together. And I have a huge admiration for people at the age of 12, 13 that have all of this figured out. And I have 35 years of going back. 35 years of pieces. It's a huge puzzle that I'm still trying to put together, but every piece that matches makes me feel more like myself.
Yeah. Did the two of you meet through stream?
Mm-hmm.
We did, yeah.
Okay. When was that?
It was about less than a year and a half ago, I think.
Yeah. It's almost a year and a half now.
I think so. So Syn was one of the first streamers I've met.
And when I met Emma, I thought she was completely crazy, because at the time I was playing Subnautica, and Emma was the one person who was like, Subnautica is super fun, and please go swim to the Reaper and cuddle it and hug it. And I was like, what is wrong with you? So yeah, but I've loved her ever since.
Amazing. So I know you obviously, when we spoke last time, Syn, that you said that your main aim here is, and your main kind of aim was to present as an ally and to be an ally. What was it that kind of led you towards wanting to take on that role? Because obviously a lot of people. There's a difference, I suppose, between being an ally and just treating people normal, and then actually being an active ally. What was it that kind of led you to become more active in that way?
For me, it was two things. For one, I think as people who try to be supportive of LGBTQ topics, you get told a lot what not to do. Mm-hmm. What you absolutely shouldn't do, but nobody ever tells you what you can actually do and what you should do. So that was something, because I have a bunch of friends in the LGBTQ scene. Emma is one of my dearest friends, and like I I don't want to just not do the wrong thing. I want to do the right thing. I want to be supportive and helpful. So that was one. And the second part, which happens a lot, I feel, and funnily enough also happened when you started putting up marketing for the stream, that people seem to think it's not my business to talk about things like that. I got 1 or 2 messages from people saying, hey, sorry, it's not your business to talk about trans topics because you're not trans, which I think is weird.
It's an interesting one because like the only comparison I've ever been able to draw is within the mental health community, because and that's the fact that within mental health there is a kind of ongoing debate about whether people who don't have mental health should talk about mental health, and I mean I'm on the side of bloody course they should. It's more kind of like there's a difference between talking about it and then there's making decisions, and it's kind of telling us how to feel or telling us how to be. There's a big kind of, the number one piece of advice I give to people who don't struggle with their mental health is basically if they're dealing with a person in crisis, don't expect that person to be the bigger person. Like, you know, in that situation, don't expect that the person that is in crisis, don't expect them to be more rational, because it's like, you know, you try to be the more rational one in this situation because you have the capacity for it. And that's the whole thing, is that like often there'll be that thing where people without mental health will refer to what a person with mental health does as overreacting, which is reacting in a way that is 100% appropriate with my condition. You know, it's like I get considered to be overreacting in response to a neurotypical person, and then a person with borderline personality disorder, for example, might get accused of being overreacting way more frequently than I do. And it's and I know I'm not saying I've never overreacted in my life, of course I have, but there's a very big difference between I'm overreacting because I'm, you know, a human and humans overreact at times, and my condition is diminishing me of the capacity to react in a way that I actually genuinely wish I could. And that's a bit different. But I think that's the whole problem, is like you've said there, is that there's so much about what not to say within the topic of racism. There's so much of what not to do or say. Within the topic of mental health, there's so much of what not to do or say. And yeah, it's the thing is, well, how are we all ever going to kind of get along and treat each other equally and with respect if one half of us isn't invited to the conversation?
Exactly. And also I feel like with this pushing it more into the direction of this is everything you're not allowed to do or say, people will just not bother saying anything at all when it comes to it, which is what I absolutely do not want. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is the thing. It's like, well, either if you tell people what not to say, they either say absolutely nothing. The nice ones kind of say nothing. The not so nice one go, "Ooh, we know exactly where the buttons are to press," you know. And it can be extremely messy. So what type of, since coming out, Emma, what has been the kind of the response?
Well, I mean, for the first few people, of course, I pick and chose who to tell, right? Because I was searching for the validation and the support, not so much for the discussion. Yeah. So the very beginning was a very controlled response, and mostly the answers were on the side of, you know, freaking finally. I've known it, you've known it, finally you accepted it. But as I started talking to other people and opening up more, because right now for the part of physical transition, during COVID times, it's very difficult. Waiting lists are in the 5-year range. Everything is super in the future, and I didn't want to wait 5 more years to start the transition. So I started with the social side of transition, and it's been very validating for the people who accept it, but also very difficult for people who don't. because there's still this notion of being trans enough. So, you know, I don't look the part, I don't sound the part, I have no business calling myself a trans woman yet. Which begins a whole discussion of, you know, it's not your looks or the way you sound that make you a man or a woman or a non-binary person. It's just something that you are. And of course, I would like to look more traditionally feminine. And even today, I was debating, should I use my normal voice? Should I use the voice that I've been working on? Should I put makeup on? Should I just come as I am? And I finally decided, you know, if the conversation's about the early stages of transition, this is it.
Yeah.
So there's often a conversation to be had about why I should be allowed to identify as a woman, even though, I mean, I know you wouldn't tell by looking at me, and I fully understand that fact, but it's not hormones or surgery or voice lessons that are going to make me a woman, right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
there's still a lot of people who, even after you explain this, they ask, okay, so when is the, you know, what do you think the timeline is going to be? And then I ask for what? For hormones? For fully transition? No, for you to become a woman. And it's very frustrated after half an hour of this to still end up in the same question. And I feel like this is a big barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is that from the not trans enough? Does that come from within the LGBTQ community, or was that from outside?
Both.
Because for me, what right have I got to even speak about any of this stuff? But I'm here to learn. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help other people learn as well. But I know it's like you said when in the answer to your first question, you know, you've always been a woman, you've always been female. You know, it's and that is that, you know, as an outsider in myself, that seems to be the narrative within when someone comes out, we then say, well, they've always been the gender that they've come out as. That's kind of the narrative. So we don't. It's like it doesn't seem to be. And again, I know this is probably why you're saying about talking about this stage of it, because generally when a person does come out, they've had they're further along in the process. You know, they've had hormones, or they've had top surgery, or they've had a full transition by that point. But the line is they've always been a woman, or they've always been a man, depending on what obviously they've come out as. So that kind of really flies in the face and contradicts you're not trans enough. And I mean, you know, as a person who's bipolar, it's like I should be able to accept that two contradicting things can exist within a person. But I can't see the rationale there. Like, I can't see how that. I mean, I suppose, is it different people with different opinions, or is it the same person who believes you've always been a woman, but also, and you're also not trans enough? It's like, is it the same person?
It depends. And I mean, I do think that you probably have a lot of the same steps that I've had so far, because I've spent a lot of years trying to be a man. You know, I mean, even if you look back a year ago when I started streaming, I would shave my head, grow my beard. You know, I was trying really hard, because people always saw me as feminine. But of course, things are very backward still or they were in Portugal 10 years ago when I left. So a lot of people would just assume I was gay because of my femininity. Mm-hmm. And I've had to learn how to be a guy. I had to change the way I walk, the way I move, what kind of movement with my hands I was allowed to do. I spend a lot of time working to make my voice lower, which of course now I regret, because now it's a lot of work backwards. But, you know, I also have mental illnesses, and I talk to a lot of people with mental illnesses, but trying to fit in is the kind of effort that I think none of us is unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
Because there's this definition of normal that we might not agree with, but it's what causes us the least amount of problems. So we try to be that normal, and you're never going to be good enough for everyone, right? And there's always people who are not going to like the efforts you've made, or say that you're going in the wrong direction with it. But at the end of the day, the only person you can be is you, right? Everybody else is taken.
Yeah.
So and with the whole trans enough, you get the, even from, I've gotten it even from other trans people, because this is not just for LGBT or for mental illness or anything else. Sometimes when you spend a lot of a lot of years working towards something, you forget that when you're at the finish line, you forget that you weren't always at the finish line. You forget that at a point years before you were at the start. Yeah. And there's a lot of people who have trouble with me calling myself a woman when they only start calling themselves women after transition. Yeah. or at the final stages of transition. And it's just like, I write novels as a hobby, and I've had people telling me, if you're not a published author, you cannot call yourself a writer. Why not? I write. Yeah. And it's the same thing. People focus on the results.
What do we need to be classed as technically as streamers? But not like we're all self-published.
Yeah. So yeah. And there is exactly the same thing. Some people say like, oh well, you have like an average viewers of X, so you cannot technically call yourself a streamer. You're live, but you're not really a streamer. And it's that sort of gatekeeping that you go through in a lot of things, and being LGBT, being transgender is no different. There will always be people saying you haven't achieved this, so technically you are not that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I imagine again, Syn, this comes back to the point you were just mentioning before, is that lovely phrase gatekeeping. Like what sort of when you get again that those you shouldn't be doing this kind of what role do you have? Again, is that coming from is that a combination of both within the LGBT community and outside?
It's actually both. So it's always like it's coming from different sides. Obviously, when it comes from outside of the community, it's more like, why are you even doing this? It's not your issue. Just don't bother. And from within, it's really more like it's not your place to speak for those people. But I'm not speaking for anybody. Like I would never ever in my life dare to presume to speak about any of Emma's experiences because they were not my experiences. But what I will absolutely do is I will always, and loudly and proudly, will be here to validate Emma's experiences. And that I can do anytime. It's absolutely free for me to do that. It's not hurting me. It's not hurting my image or whatever warped image people have of how they have to be. And it doesn't cost me a single thing to do this for her and for other people. So I think this is not putting her and her experiences down as so many people perceive it. It's actually what I'm trying to do is I want to lend her my voice to make her voice louder and stronger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one easy way to settle this right now, isn't there? Emma, how do you feel about Syn's allyship, allyhood, allegiance?
and I just want to say two things before I answer. One, nobody is a representative of LGBT. I certainly am not a representative of the LGBT. I did not receive the Grand Book of Queerness when I joined the community.
I want that book.
I would love that book too. There's always things you don't know, you don't understand, but respect and acceptance is the first step from within the community and outside of the community, right? So we all make mistakes. We all have questions. We all have things that we need to learn. So that's the first thing. Syn is not a representative of the LGBT community. I'm not a representative of the LGBT community. And the second thing that I want to say is there is a massive difference between being part of the conversation and overriding the voice of a minority group.
Yes.
Which I think is the fear from a lot of people, both within the community and outside. You know, is this non-trans, not bisexual, not, non-binary person going to amplify my voice or take my voice away and input their opinion on top of mine? And from the perspective of allies, am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to have an opinion on this if I'm not part of this group?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, you are definitely allowed to have an opinion, but you do also need to have have consideration for the people who are part of that group. And you need to listen and you need to amplify. And I think this is one of the things that Syn does so well, because she never overwrites anybody's narrative with hers. And she helped me so much, not just with the whole transgender journey, but also as as an immigrant. There's been a very rising anti-immigrant sentiment, I think everywhere, but in Europe where I am. And there was a lot of times that I just can't fight every single fight.
Yeah.
As somebody who is not from the right country or isn't the right gender or doesn't have the right sexuality, I feel like I'm fighting in a lot of fronts. And every single time that I felt, I need to be fighting this today because of this happened or that happened, and I just don't have the energy, because that happens. If you're fighting every day, some days you just can't fight. Yeah. And Syn was there and said, like, I'll fight for you today. And I think that's such a big asset to have an ally, a friend who will say, you can't fight today, you don't have to, I will do it. And that is being an ally. Yeah. Right? Is asking you, what do you need? How can I help? And Syn has never failed to ask me that. Not once did I ever felt like she was overriding what I wanted to say or what I needed to say. She always, every time I had something to say, she would amplify it, she would share it, she would add to the conversation, she would find people that could be beneficial for the conversation. Every time I said, I can't do it, she would post it, she would start a conversation, she would talk, and then she would ask me, do you want to be in this now? And I would either say yes or no. And then she would go from there. And I think this is, this is what we need. We need people who are there for us without overriding us. So should Syn have a part in this discussion? 100%. She has made a lot of positive changes in my journey so far. And I believe that she will continue to do so. And obviously there's that little detail that if not for Syn, I wouldn't be in this stream right now.
Well, I think there is a kind of there's a running theme through a lot of this. And when you said earlier about how when there's not a lot of information or there's not a lot of advice on how to deal with this stage in the transition because no one talks about it, and you're very right in saying, and this is true in a lot of different areas. If you speak to an absolute expert on something, sometimes they forget what the beginning was like. And this can be the case a lot of times. And I coach other coaches, and one of the best ways to help a person is, instead of telling them what you learned this morning that's making your life richer and better today, is trying to remember what you needed to hear when you were in that person's position. And I think the same is true about the position of an ally, is that an ally is usually someone who has, and this is whether this is with mental health, whether this is with race, whether this is with gender, sexual identity, an ally is generally someone who they've listened to people of the group that they're representing, and in their outsider brain has now had something click. And actually that can be really, really powerful, because if you can put that into an analogy of what made what that person click for you, And what made you, let's say you had one opinion about race your entire life, and then you have an encounter and that changed it. Let's say you have an opinion about gender for your entire life, and there's an encounter then that changes it. If you then have this wonderful ability now to go and speak, again, not for or not over, but you get the ability to speak as a person of, actually, this is how it clicked for me. And then you can go and speak to somebody else within your, I hate the phrase, but it's called the in-group, within your in-group, who might be more prepared at this moment in time to listen to you than they are to actually sit and have these type of conversations. And that's kind of like when I had Wreck-It Raven on a few weeks back, and that was my moment where, as soon as I brought a black creator on to talk about racism within mental health, that was when I got my DMs and my retweets and all of those things with, why are you doing this? And it's like, because basically there's a lot of white people that probably won't listen to a black creator unless there's a white creator in the middle. And it's like, and we through that experience, obviously the analogy I made there that a few people fed back to me about from the episode, where I said, look, if someone in school was bullied for their weight or their glasses, and I was bullied for both, but like, he was bullied for their weight or their glasses or the amount of money they had. In fact, I was bullied for all three. It's like I'm going, and as an adult now, they were to open up about that trauma, you wouldn't dismiss that trauma. Within the mental health community, we wouldn't dismiss that trauma, right? We wouldn't. And then, but if a person opens up and the thing they were bullied about, instead of being their glasses, was the colour of their skin, it's like there's a lot of people that are quick to dismiss that trauma and say, okay, well, are you sure it was to do with race? It's like, I was called Four Eyes, which my response, and I think I was a little bit too intelligent for my time, because the song Two Heads Are Better Than One had just come out, I think. Two heads are better than one, it's double the pleasure and triple the fun, or whatever. And when someone called me Four Eyes, I was like, well, two heads are better than one, and two heads have got four eyes. And if I've got four eyes, then my four eyes are better than your two. I usually just got a punch in the face at that point, but I tried to be now. For me, like, if I was to say that was about my glasses, that was about the fact that I wore glasses as a kid, no one would go, are you sure? Like, are you sure it was about the fact that you wore glasses? If someone called me fatty about the fact that I was overweight, are you sure? Are you sure it was about your weight? Whereas if someone uses a racial slur against someone, it's like, then like, oh, well, are you sure it was racism? And I'm just like, it's like, it's just so obvious. And I kind of think that sometimes that, like, when we have someone that is in the middle, that those things, it's like, again, those are the analogies that made me realize, hang on a minute, because I'm sure I will probably, I can't remember for definite, but I am pretty certain that at some point in my life I've probably asked a person of color, are you sure it was about your race? I'm almost certain I've asked that. I don't remember it, but I'm sure I have. And that was earlier in my journey, and that was when I didn't realize things as much. And then obviously making these type of analogies makes those things click for me. So if that makes it click for me as, a white creator or a white mental health representative, hopefully that can make it click for someone else within the white community. And it's
exactly the same in this conversation. It's why I feel like it's actually very important for non-trans people to amplify the voices of trans people, because as shitty as it is, there are a lot of people that are more likely to listen to me than they are to Emma, for reasons that are obviously that suck. We can't say it any other way, but if I can make one person then change their mind, hey, great, I'm happy about that. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, and we're here today. Dave is not trans, Syn is not trans. That is not taking the space of a trans creator, inviting me and talking about it as well. There are different audiences, and we want to achieve normalization. And that includes reaching as many people as we can. So because Dave is doing this today, because Syn is here joining me, there's nobody, you're not preventing anybody else from joining the conversation, whether they're trans or not. Just like, I mean, I hear this all the time in mental health discussions, especially if we're talking about things like autism. And somebody is telling their story and somebody else goes, yeah, but I have an autistic friend and they don't do any of those things, so you're probably not autistic. It's like,
we call that the double spectrum.
Yeah.
Over here, I think I mentioned that to you when we spoke the other week. Is that within mental health, there is a spectrum of mental health, and then there's literally a couple of hundred, if not more, conditions within that spectrum. But then within each and every single one of them, there is a spectrum within that, and that was why, like, I don't know if you saw it, but like when you said before that I am not I've not been handed the great big book of queer. It's like I am not, like, I don't know if you noticed it, but my entire, like, all the blood rushed to my face, and I was like, oh, I'm so excited that you've just said that, because this is such an important thing to get through to people. I do not represent the entire mental health community. I represent my opinions on mental health, which I have garnered through 39 years of living with bipolar disorder. I don't sit here and say that they are all the opinions in the face of the world. I mean, occasionally I do, because my bipolar disorder makes me think that I'm unstoppable, remember? But most of the time, I don't think I'm God, except for those times I do. And that's the whole thing, is like, I know that I'm a representation of me, and I'm doing my best to say, here is an example. And I think that's exactly it. You know, we had Cave Mobster on last week, who is autistic, but she doesn't represent like the whole of autism. She just represents her representation of autism. And I think that we as a society, we as a species, need to get away from the idea that when we see one representation of something, that we think, I know everything there is to know about this now, which is ultimately what that whole "you're not trans enough" thing is born out of, you know, a representation of what is. And it's funny, because we don't expect every straight person to be exactly the same. We don't expect every cis person to be exactly the same. We don't expect every single person without a mental health diagnosis to be exactly the same. We realize that we are different humans, and there is differences within personality, there's difference within upbringing, values. Like, you know, I have a lot of very feminine qualities, and I put that down to the fact that I was raised by two women. I was raised by my mum and my grandmum. Nan. I should have said it in the English way. Me nan. And I didn't have a strong male influence. However, you know, my dad did dress as Tina Turner, and like, so even if I'd had my dad around, I probably still had a lot of because, you know, he obviously had those feminine qualities as well. He was a cabaret artist. It was something I cringed about as a 12-year-old, but now literally look back and I go, good on you. It's like, and this is the whole thing, is that, yeah, we need to kind of accept that why do we think that if within, you know, the so-called normal, being cis, hetero, non-mental health, white, whatever religion's the most normal one these days, I don't know, which like we expect a rich tapestry of people within that. Okay, now can we not just put two and two together and expect a rich tapestry of people within the LGBTQ community, within each an individual, every single letter within all of that, within, I mean, Q being probably the most broad spectrum, but like within L, there is a spectrum of people. There is not people who are not lesbian enough, or too lesbian. Has anyone ever been called two lesbians? You're just a bit too lesbian, you know?
Definitely. I've known a few.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're showing it too much. Stop. That's not okay. I mean, we have to admit that as people, we are a combination of biases and incomplete information, right? And this is never as obvious as when you have a small kid. You know, you go out with a kid, the kid has never seen an animal. They see a cat, it's like, what's that? That's a cat. And the kid looks, okay, it has fur, it walks in 4 legs, it's faster than me because I can't catch it. So that's a cat. And then you see a dog and they go, big cat. No, honey, that's a dog. It's a different animal, because that's the information they have.
Yeah.
Right. And as adults, we should be able to realize that we don't have all the information ever. Right. And I feel like this, if we do it in a healthy way, leads to conversation, discussion, even arguments sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think there's two positions where you can go into an argument. You either want to change somebody else's mind or you want to change your own. And I feel like if you go into an argument with the position of wanting to change somebody else's mind, you listen very little and you learn very little.
Yeah.
And if you go into a discussion thinking, is my opinion based on facts? Is my value on this strong enough to endure somebody speaking against it and still hold? If yes, then I will leave that discussion validated. If not, hopefully I will leave that discussion a bit smarter.
Yeah.
So I think wanting to learn and being respectful about going about finding that learning is the basis of stopping a lot of these problems that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd go one further and say that when with arguments, people go into it not with the a goal to change the other person's mind, but to win. And change the person's mind is one version of winning, but having the other person get so frustrated with you that they get angry and storm off is still winning. I was still standing in the argument, And the funny thing is, our actions tend to kind of lean towards our goal, and if your goal is to win, you're not going to be doing, as you said then, you're not going to be doing any listening. You're not there to win. And as a result, when someone wants to win, they might go for the more hurtful places. They might go for those buttons. They might go for, we've probably all done it where we've said something in an argument. We're like, we can't show it, but it's inside our head. We're like, oh shit, I really shouldn't have said that, because our brain's like, oh, well, I just want to get the upper hand here. And the upper hand can be gained in so many different ways. But yeah, it's, it is. I think we need to be having more of these discussions, and we need to be going back to kind of what we said about before. Those discussions aren't going to be happening if straight cis white male people, or any straight cis people, or not trans enough people aren't invited to the conversation. It's like we're going to just create echo chambers.
There is a speech that I really like. It's about feminism. It's by Emma Watson. She did it in 2014, I think, for UN Women. And she says that a couple of years ago, Hillary Clinton also gave a speech about feminism in Beijing, I think, and only 10% of the audience were male. And how can we think anything is going to change in terms of feminism if only half of the people that are affected by it are invited and participate in the conversation? Yep. And it's the same with LGBTQ topic. It's the same with transgender topics. The topics, they may not personally affect me and my life, but they affect the society I very much am a part of. And therefore, it's important for us all to participate in this conversation and feel invited to participate in it.
And when we're saying invited, we mean actually invited, not you can come, but you're not allowed to touch anything, say anything, or do anything. Just listen and learn, because we're the ones with the information and you're the one that needs to learn it. Because that's not an honest invitation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that much comes from that premise.
Yeah, yeah. And it's that as well is that when we do create those spaces, it's what is the kind of purpose of our speech when everyone already agrees with us? Like we can all rally each other up and feel great about things, and that's cool and that's necessary and that's good. But again, going back to that, what's the goal going in? If the goal is to change hearts and minds, You ain't going to change the hearts and minds that you're not speaking to.
And I mean, validation is 100% needed because, you know, the journey is hard, whether it's LGBT journey or a mental health journey or just anything. We need like-minded people to remind us that we're not the only ones. I mean, I have my mental health issues as well. I've been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, OCD. I'm currently being tested for autism and ADHD, and I have fibromyalgia, which for people who don't know what it is, it means that I'm constantly in pain, like my whole body cramps all the time, and I can't remember anything 5 seconds later. But, you know, and I have days where just existing is all I can do, right? And I have this huge to-do list, and I can't do none of it. You know, it's a major victory just to take a shower, right? And then curl up and die. And when you live with this every day of your life, and people say, you know, everybody has pain and they can still do their thing, so deal with it. Or if you tried a little bit harder, or maybe you just need to accept that you're lazy. And you start internalizing all of this, right? And if you don't have people that've been through the same thing and tell you, but it happens to me too. You get to a point where you just believe the narrative that you're just not good enough or that you're not going in the right path. So validation is 100% needed.
Yeah.
But if all your discussion goes inside that bubble, you end up hardening your stance because everybody in the conversation agrees with you. So you feel a bit too validated and you stop believing that other people with different opinions can also be right. So I think it's important to always have all sorts of voices in the discussion. And some of them you're going to agree with, some of them you aren't. But when you only talk to people who think exactly like you start thinking that you are the only truth, the way you think. And even if later you try to talk to somebody who doesn't have as much experience about something with it, you're a lot less patient with them. Because this is a narrative that you've been hearing every day and you internalize it and you fortified it and you make a wall around it. And who's this guy or girl or, you know, whatever that came to me and tell me that maybe there's another point.
Yeah.
You know, this is my truth and it's the truth. And that makes it so difficult to have an open discussion with somebody else about it. And it's definitely not healthy for you. And it really does not help with the normalization of whatever you were trying to discuss. Because if you just go and yell at people and say that you're the only person that holds the truth, that normally is not the best way to win minds and hearts.
Yeah, it's also, that's not a normalized conversation. We're talking about normalizing conversations, and normal conversations don't have, here's a list of things we can and can't talk about. Here's like, you know, the joke I always make on this one is like, I mean, I'm from Liverpool, so I'll throw Liverpool under the bus on this one. But it's like having a conversation about football and saying that you're not allowed to mention Liverpool. It's there's a lot of people in chat will probably agree that you shouldn't, but it's like, can you like, and we've. Like within mental health, for example, the phrase within the UK, the phrase committed suicide is not acceptable anymore because it's not a crime, hasn't been a crime since the late 60s. And I understand why, but that's actually not the case in many other places in the world. It's still part and parcel of normal day-to-day conversation. And so if you're having kind of like a international conversation about that, or even if you're having a conversation with someone who's not got the memo within the UK that we don't use that phrase anymore, it can be very much as soon as someone says that phrase, it's like, right, we shouldn't be talking about that. And it's like, and we have the discussion here a lot about what level should you let person talk about their trauma to, and it's like that's, you know, again, it's like who's the person who's not mental enough or the person who's too mental. It's like there's mental health spectrum. I'm like my rule is, if talk about it openly, and if it's too open for some people, that's my fault. If it's not open enough for other people, that's also my fault. I'll take responsibility for that in this community. But yeah, it's what was there was a point that you made a minute ago. I've forgotten what was said 5 seconds ago now. There was a point that you made a minute ago that I really wanted to get onto. but I've forgotten it. So instead,
I think what you're trying to say, Dave, is that yes, for example, the UK is far enough to have recognized that the phrasing to commit suicide is bad because it puts the person who has taken their life in a bad way.
Yep.
But not everywhere the world is that far. But by not talking about it, the rest of the world will never get there. Or maybe they will, but a lot later, because at some point they will figure it out on their own. You actually need to sit down with people and say, hey, okay, the phrase to commit suicide, it indicates that somebody has done a crime.
Yep.
And this is why you should rethink your phrasing. And I think it's the same with trans rights, LGBTQ. If you are just like, no, we're not going to talk about the problems, we're just going to highlight the positive things, things will change, sure, but at very, very different speeds and paces.
Yeah, I'm going to actually go to one in the chat. I've broken the rule about not going back to chat until we're ready for questions, but because it's in line now. What is actually the best way of phrasing it? Best way. I don't like to use the phrase "best way" because that suggests that we actually know what the best way is. The suggested way is that the person took their own life or attempted. There is within the UK. There was this suggestion of completed suicide, or the one that I really hate, which is successful suicide. And I'm like, how is that better than? It's like that's But this is the whole thing. Is like, again, not every single one of us is going to agree on the wording. We had a big conversation like last week about person first language, which is kind of person first language is really being pushed for within academia, and I've just pronounced academia as if it was part of macadamia, so it's academia. But first, within the macadamia nut, person first language is being discussed, and it's being suggested now, so it would be person with autism, person with bipolar, as opposed to autistic person, bipolar person. And most in a similar sort of way to before, when obviously like people outside of the community have said to Syn, you shouldn't be doing this, and then you're doing it on behalf of Emma, and Emma says you should. Therefore, case closed. But it's in. Whenever I speak to people with disabilities, there we go, I've just done it myself. They would prefer to be say, I am a disabled person. I am an autistic person. I say I have bipolar, but I think the problem is we're never going to fully agree. We're not all going to like how things are actually worded, and it comes back to that idea that one person with mental health thinks the same as every other person. One trans person thinks the same as every other trans person. Yeah. And
there's always so many barriers to a conversation. I mean, personally speaking, as a non-native English speaker, I probably would be stuck for like 5 minutes trying to figure out how to say it without using the expression committed suicide.
Yeah,
because that's how I learned how to say it, how to refer to that particular act. And I think this opens up another important conversation where I think a lot of people are getting stuck. How do I approach it? And I mean, at least when people are talking to me, I think that intent is the most important thing. If you're coming at it with the best intent and the very respectfully, and you use all the wrong words, I'm still fine talking to you. If you're coming at me disrespectfully and use all the right words, I probably won't talk to you. So I think that intent is important, and we should be mindful enough that not everybody communicates the same way. Not everybody has the same mastery of the language. Mm-hmm. And people are from different backgrounds, different ages, different cultures. All of that influences how we communicate. So when you have good intentions and you're talking to a receptive person, it's okay to use the wrong words as long as you're willing to be corrected, right? Yeah. And you don't need to say sorry, right? Personally, I prefer you to say thank you, if that makes sense, because I don't mind that you just said an offensive word. Even if I particularly don't find it offensive, I probably will tell you that a lot of people do, and I explain why. Mm-hmm. I don't need you to apologize to me. I'm not offended. I am trying to help you with that search of knowledge that you said that you were going through. So the intent is so much more important than the word usage to an open conversation. That doesn't mean that if you learn a more accepted way of asking the same question, you shouldn't use it in the future. Yeah. But I think that fear should not prevent you. The fear of lacking vocabulary should not prevent you from starting a conversation if you do it respectfully.
And I would like to hop on that, Emma, for a second, because I just remember actually what I did when you shared you coming out with me, because you were the first very, very close friend that I had who came out as trans. I had acquaintances and like somewhat friends, but not in that close proximity. And being the person that I am that always needs to research everything, I went and I Googled how do I support my friend who just came out to me? And it very much circles back to what Dave said before. It's like you read all of these articles and you read them and you're like, I feel like this is putting Emma in a box of how she has to be now as a trans person. And I'm not even sure if that's what she is or how she is now. And then I threw it all away and I went with the approach. I just asked her, what do you need of me? What can I do for you? How do you want me to support you? Because I can read 25,000 books on the topic, but they will never be exactly what Emma needs, because it's her experience and it's her as a person that now needs something, which might not be what another trans person needed in that moment. So be respectful and ask what people need. I think it's the best way to go with that.
Yeah. And that's a phenomenal piece of advice, that instead of typing it in Google's box, type it in someone's message box or inbox. But it's
if anybody thinks that Syn shouldn't be in this conversation, DM me.
Or me, I'm joining the fight now. But that's honestly, that's such an amazing piece of information, an amazing concept, that it feels like it should just be common sense, and the funny thing about common sense is it's hardly ever common, but it feels like that should just be obvious. Once you've said it, it's like, yeah, okay, that's so obvious, but it does actually need to be said. And that is the same for if someone is struggling with bereavement. What do you need from me right now? Do you want to talk about it, or do you want a friend who's going to sit there and play Subnautica with you and distract you from it? You know, it's like, do you want it? The same when it's a person's mental health, because sometimes we want to talk about our mental health, and other times we just want a break from talking about our mental health. And coming back to what Emma said earlier, it's like, some days we want to fight, other days we don't want to fight, other days we need to recuperate, we need to have rest days, we need to take a step back so that we're strong for the next fight, you know. I've got one more. I mean, we're already kind of going over on time, which I'm not on any time schedule at all, but I've got one major.
Sleeping, I'm fine.
We kind of expected that, didn't we?
Yes.
I've got kind of one more primary question, and I do want to really open it up to chat. I think chat have already asked a bunch of great questions as well, which I'll try and hopefully it's been a very active chat tonight, so hopefully they've.
Would you mind if I took just 2 minutes to address something before we change conversations, because I want to address what Syn said?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is a bit of an aside conversation. Probably would take a whole stream to discuss this, but
I'll just get comfy.
I'll try to be quick. Clear communication is something that I've been working on for the past year with a good friend of mine, because she's been doing working and reading and getting better at it for 15-20 years now, and it has literally changed the way that I interact with people, the way that I talk to people. It is so important for you to learn clear, objective, non-aggressive communication, because we have the tendency, yes, it's Maggie Sig, you know who it is. So we have the tendency to want to help. I feel. And we tend to forget that the way that we want to help is not always the way the person needs to be helped. Or
I could tell where that was going on. Sorry. I wish I had a poker face sometimes. But anyway.
Because we don't like to see people suffering, right? And we all have our ideas on how to fix things. But what works for us doesn't work for other people. And this is another concept, the love languages. I don't know if anybody heard of it, but we tend to communicate in our love language to others because we want to send love. But people not everybody has the same love language as you. If I'm having a bad day, I like if my wife comes and gives me a hug and say, you got this. I like touch. I like words of affirmation. On the other hand, if my wife is super stressed because the house is a mess and I go and give her a hug, that's exactly the wrong thing to do because it's my love language, not hers. And she would react a lot better if I went and decluttered a bit to give her some mental space.
I tidied the kitchen in the hour before this stream for the very same reason.
Good
so
job,
it's
Dave.
important to
job.
learn how the other person communicates. And also very, very, very important to be honest with yourself. And anybody who's done any sort of self-reflection probably knows this. But for some reason, I only learned this after 35 years. Every time I needed help from somebody, I would go to them and say, what's your opinion on this? Mm-hmm. Because, of course, I always want people's opinion because I'm an open-minded person. No, I don't. Sometimes I just want validation. I want people to say, you got this, right? But I was not being honest to myself about what I needed. And I would say, what's your opinion on this? And then when they give me an opinion that was contrary to what I wanted to hear, I would get upset at them for giving me exactly what I asked them. Yeah. Because I wasn't being honest with myself. So clear communication is so, so, so important. Look it up. It's so good because you're able to be honest about what you need and what you want. And you can ask people directly. And I mean, like Segi already mentioned, Maggie comes to me and say, I'm going to tell you about something and I need you to say, this sucks. And then she tells me the story and I say, this sucks, right? Because that's what she actually needed to hear. And she was honest enough to say, I need you to validate how I feel. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need your opinion. I need you to, say this sucks. And it's so weird in the beginning, but it's so freeing when you know yourself enough to know what you need and tell people, I need this. And this can go for all of these discussions we've been having, mental health or LGBT, saying, I need this, or I need to know more about this, or I need your support, or I need I need your validation. And it makes these conversations go so much more fluidly and with so much less fear. And it ends in a much better result than if you're trying to guess what the right thing to say is. Just ask, saying I want to have this conversation with you. What kind of pre-work should we do so that this conversation goes well? Because I'm nervous about this, right? And I mean, I talked to Syn about this stream before we went live, saying I'm super nervous, right? What can
Did I fix that, by the way? I pride myself on being quite easy to talk to.
And I was like, what can we do? What kind of discussions are we going to have? What kind of clear communication and being honest about how you feel. And once we went live, we were fine. It helps a lot. So take your time to discover yourself, because once you know exactly what you need, what kind of instincts you have, whether it's to just offer help, even if nobody asked you, which is my case. If somebody comes with a problem, I'll fix. Exactly. The more you know yourself, the more
getting better at
you'll be
it.
able to talk to other people.
Yeah.
So that was my.
That's awesome.
My pitch.
Honestly, if the legendary Jigs is in chat, the question you asked me the other day, totally and utterly related to this. And yeah, basically he had a friend who who would literally always try and jump in with a fix and like immediately. And I said to him, just say to that friend, look, I need to tell you something. I need to fully offload it. And can you just give me the space to offload it? And then if you've got any questions or the fix or anything like, can we do that at the end when I'm finished? And it's just one of these things that we have to create a unusual situation in the short term. I call it a slingshot, which is why I have one of them sat on my desk. It's like you create a tension. You actually create a deliberate tension at first because your brain's saying to you, I can't go up and tell this person how I want to be spoken to, because that's weird and that's this and that's going to make them uncomfortable. And then you go and do it and it doesn't, and it all goes well. And that's the result, the slingshot. You put the tension in first and then you get the result when it flies forward. Whereas if you aren't clear with a person about communication, that's what I call a boomerang. It goes forward in the short term. We avoid that initial confrontation for having that conversation, but then the boomerang comes whipping back, and that is over the lifetime of that relationship. Resent builds. You don't want to use that person to open up to. You start distancing yourself from that person maybe, and you either give yourself short-term discomfort or long-term discomfort. And yeah, it's funny that we'll usually choose the long-term discomfort because that's future Dave's problem, or future Emma's problem, future Syn's problem. It's like, and I'll choose future Dave's problem over present Dave's problem. But chat, I'm going to ask Emma another question. If you do have questions, please do get them in. Again, if you've got questions for Syn, just at me and then say for Syn. If you've got questions for Emma, at me and then say for Emma, and I will get to as many of them as I can. The question I have for you is, you've talked a little bit about your struggles with mental health. Mm-hmm. Has kind of your transition and has the process of your re-identification impacted that, and if so, how?
Yeah, so there's always, and I mean, I'm just going to put this out there. Normally when you're talking about your gender identity, your sexual identity, romantic inclination, there's always this big taboo, which is to mention any sort of mental illness. Because it just makes it so easy for people to say, like, how do you know that being trans isn't a mental illness then? Yeah. Right? So there's this big barrier in there.
That's just reminded me of something we said we were going to talk about today, actually. I wrote it in my notepad, didn't I? And I've not opened the notepad. The notepad's here, it's just not open. I'm going to it's got tissues on top of it. I thought we might cry today.
We're not done yet.
I know. Okay, sorry. Carry on.
No, but it has there has been some change, because I mean all of the things that bring you discomfort take space in your brain, right? Whether it's physical illness, mental illness, emotional stress, all of that takes space in your brain. And at a point when, like, for me, it kind of cascades. When I'm feeling more dysphoric, my OCD gets worse. My mental health takes a dive. So all of the depression, the anxiety, all of that gets more pressing. Yeah. Because there's no space in my mind anymore. So everything flares up. Yeah. And one of the things that I've been noticing is that the further I go into my transition, even within my social transition, that part of me that was taking space in my brain, the not being able to be myself, the whole careful with how you move your hands, careful with the words that you use. Say gut, don't say tummy. That kind of stupid stuff, because you get judged by how you vocalize things, by how you act, by how you sit, by how you move. All of those little reminders take space in your mind. Yeah. And the more the more out I am, so to speak, the less little things I need to remember not to do or to be careful with. So all of that has been releasing space in my brain. I've been throwing a lot of those insecurities in the trash, and that kind of gives my brain the space to deal with other things. So actually my mental state has improved tremendously, even on the other facets, on the depression and anxiety and all of that. It has been getting so much better because I have more space to process that information. And one of the big changes in my life was I've always thought that I hated myself. You know, I hated how I was, how I talked, how I moved, how other people dealt with me. And last year, I finally decided, you know, I'm going to have to spend the rest of my life with me. I'm the only person I can't get rid of. So might as well be my own friend. And when I got to that part where I wanted to become my friend, I realized that I didn't hate myself. I hated my circumstances. You know, and the reason why it gave me such strong feelings is because I didn't hate myself. I love myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't care of what happened to me. So that newfound self-love gave me so much freedom to express myself, to be myself, and also more patience and more understanding to the mental illnesses that I was struggling with. And that just creates an overall sense of peace that has been very beneficial for me. And of course, I still have bad days. You know, I mean, more and more I'm, you know, walking in front of the mirror and say, hey, you look cute today, which still feels weird, but hey, it's nice. It feels good.
And gets less weird as you do it, right?
Exactly. It becomes, you know, I say it to my friends, you know, and now I'm my own friend. So I say it to me. It's great. It's validating. It's powerful. And on the bad days, instead of saying, you know, you're stupid or you're weak or you can't do this, I say, you know, it's okay. You're having a bad day. Respect it. It'll go away, which is something that I had trouble before. On the bad days, I would feel it's going to be like this for the rest of my life. It's never going to get better. And now I have that mental space to say, you know, it will get better. Probably not today. It's okay. Respect yourself. Take a bit of time off.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I think a lot of us do this, if not everyone, then most people, I think, we say things to ourselves that we would never, ever say to a friend that came to us in that same situation.
Yeah.
Right. If Syn came to me and said, like, I'm not feeling smart or pretty or worth it today, I would never say, oh, of course you're not. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, you're horrible. I mean, you're obviously not good enough. I would never say that to a friend, but I would be okay saying it to myself every day.
Yeah.
And now it's not okay for me to say it to myself every day. So the farther I am in my transition, the more okay and the more I like the way I am. And you know, I started to love things about me that I used to hate. And for example, now I'm still in the awkward hair stage because I used to shave it and now it's coming everywhere, but I like my curls. It looks messy. I don't care. They're cute. Lots of people don't have curls. I like them. You know, it became like this self-acceptance snowball, and the more you do it, the easier it is. It's in the beginning, it's a bit fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
But when you start feeling good about your own validation about yourself, the less you require from other people, and the easier it gets to do that for the next thing, and just accept myself as had a very positive impact in my mental health. So I do think that while it is difficult to talk about mental health in the context of LGBT, that brings up a lot of questions. For example, this might be a trigger warning, so I don't know, for the next 30 seconds.
It's okay. Remember, openly mental health space, it can go in any direction.
I was I was abused by my parents as a kid, emotionally, sexually, physically. I identify as asexual now. And a lot of the first thing that a lot of people ask is, are you sure you're actually asexual or is it trauma from being sexually abused as a child? Right. And that turns it into a very difficult conversation that goes in a completely different direction from the discussion that I'm normally having, which is, normalization of non-binary people or aromantic people, asexual people, is a topic that I cover quite often. But then, since I'm also open about the sexual abuse that I suffered as a child, the conversation kind of tends to go to that side, which is, it's something worth discussing, but not when I'm trying to talk about some of more neglected LGBT identities.
Yeah.
So I think we need to accept that both things can be true. You can be, trans enough or anything else enough, which is not a thing, and still having mental illnesses like everybody else that is not in the LGBT community has. So I think both things need to be talked about, and they're two separate subjects, and they can intersect. But I think that the fear of being delegitimized as LGBT because you also have a mental illness is yet another thing that needs to be normalized.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I've said about with bipolar, it's like how much of that is me and how much of that is the bipolar. How much of like when I'm an absolute diva, how much of that it does tend to be that the more heightened my mood is, but how much of that is we've got no proof of would I have been that way other ways, and it's everything is all complete and utter speculation. And I think it is important to kind of to have those two conversations. But again, going back to the person that is probably asking you that question, there's literally a video I put up just before we went live tonight, which was a clip from a stream on yesterday. Oh my God, it was only yesterday, where I've got this philosophy of when I'm open up about my mental health to other people, and this goes back to the clear communication thing. It's taken me 39 years to come to the understanding that I have my mental health that I have right now. So therefore, I kind of don't expect the person that I'm open up to have that same level of understanding about it. So it's, I suppose, coming back to the clear communication, it's like you, in that situation, that person wants to kind of automatically go, using this heuristic in their mind, they say, aha, I've heard of this before. It's like, therefore, that A equaled B in that situation, so therefore it must equal B in this situation. And again, those things, they stop the conversation. They stop the conversation from ever turning into, but could it actually equal C? Could and as a result, I think it's such a, it's supposed to be an efficiency in our brain to categorize things, but it's actually become a bit of a laziness, become a bit of a problem for stifling conversations and stifling discussions from moving forward.
I think it's especially, maybe to add on that, in terms of things that you can't really see yet or ever, because you would never go up to a person with a broken leg asking, are you sure your leg is broken?
Yep.
But you very much would go, as you said before, up to a person, are you sure it's because of racism? Or what I get a lot is, I'm also bipolar and I have an eating disorder, but at the moment I'm not like critically underweight, but that doesn't mean I have a healthy relationship with food. Mm-hmm. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And that's the thing I think with so many mental health issues, just because you can't see it doesn't invalidate it. Like, as I said, I would never go up to a person that gets run over by a car asking, are you sure you're hurt?
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing in the whole physical to mental health kind of thing is the expression, it's a cry for help, right? And if someone got hit by a car and they're crying for help, you'd be like, well, they're just crying for help. It's like, yes, they are, because they need help. It's like, so why is a cry for help seen as such a kind of bad thing in the, it's like, yes, okay, that person's just crying for help. Maybe. I personally think they're crying for connection, but it's like, if they are crying for help, cool. And you don't want to give it to them, do you? It's like, so give them help. The person who was crying for help with these being hit by a car, cry for help, you'd call an ambulance, and you'd try and kind of, go over there and do what you can to comfort the person without making anything worse. Same. It's like, there you go. That's how to deal with mental health. In all of it, you've just learned it, the whole thing. I've just completed it for you. No, I haven't. I'm being sarcastic just in case anyone's missing it.
and so often that burden gets put on the person that needs help. You should ask for help in the way that doesn't make me uncomfortable. And I mean, how can you possibly?
That sentence makes me uncomfortable.
Such a good point.
Exactly. So, and I mean, you don't.
And you should give help in a way that doesn't make me uncomfortable. I'm the one in crisis here, but
it's like, yes, you're in crisis, you need help, but on top of that, you should think of everybody else around you and try to formulate things in a way that nobody else feels distressed. I mean,
I'll try.
What kind of request is that?
I'll try my best next time. Actually,
and we do try our best.
We do, and that's actually been the big reason now why I ask for help before my emotional capacity is diminished, because I don't want to come against that. And sometimes like you might get the whole in the hospitals and stuff, you get the whole you're not serious enough, which really bothers me, because they'll say, oh, if you're not an immediate threat to yourself or others, then it's not serious enough. And it's like, cool, you've just given me the guidebook on how to be serious enough. So what I need to do now is go away and become more unhealthy so that you will take me seriously. That seems like a good system. But as a result, like I don't think I'd go for medical attention earlier in it, but I've started as soon as I notice it, open up to my wife or open up. I open up to my own Discord community. I was totally nervous at that first because I didn't want to be the mental health guy that clearly in his own Discord doesn't appear to have his own mental health together. But it's like, but just like what you said before about like the amount of energy that I'm using trying to keep those things in, the amount of, whenever I do open up, that slows things down for me a little bit. It gives me back a little bit of energy about what if people find out, what if people list, what if people, it at least closes that tab in my brain and allows me to kind of focus on the next step. And but it also, I know that if I go beyond a certain point, I'm not going to communicate the way I communicate when I'm doing an interview. I'm not going to communicate the way I do even when I'm slightly agitated, where I can still sort of put sentences together if you give me enough time. I'm going to shout, I'm going to scream, I'm going to hurt myself probably. I'm not doing that stuff by choice. I'm not. And it's like, and yet I know how to communicate on all those things. It's not that I don't know. It's at that moment in time I do not have the capacity.
But that's, I think, where it ties back to that, what Emma so beautifully put is that sometimes you have the energy to fight and sometimes you don't. And then it's important that there are other people who will pick up the torch and take it for you. And it's not a one-way street. Like, it's not like I'm just here, yay, I'm fighting for Emma. I know that when I need her to fight for me, she will be 1,000% there as well, anytime I need it. It's just, I don't know, for me, it's common sense to do it that way. It doesn't seem to be for all people, sadly, but yeah, it's not a race against each other. We're carrying each other's torches.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get over to the questions from chat, otherwise I never will. And obviously, I'm sure there's some that have dropped off the top. So the earliest one I can scroll back to now, because chat has been just phenomenal tonight, is Siggy has said, for Syn, what's the best way to be that voice in your opinion? So that was the voice of the ally.
I think there's two things. One that I've already mentioned is please ask the people what they want and what they need you to do. Because it's not like there is a, as you called it, the book of, what did you call it? The book of LGBTQ, the book of gay?
Yeah,
I think it was just the book
of queer.
Yeah, the book of queer.
That's in my Amazon
you can read
search
and
list
you're
now.
like, okay, this is what you need to do. I'm going to ask, hey, Emma, can I help you specifically? But of course, in a much broader spectrum, what you can do as a non-trans person, Amplify Voices. I will always it can be as small as retweet something a trans person has written about their experience. Give them your platform. You don't even have to add anything to the tweet. Just use your platform to amplify it. Speak about it in your communities that might be more close-minded. Like, I tend to try and do a lot of educating in my family, who is very traditional to a fault, but that doesn't stop me from bringing up these topics and talking about it. And just, if I can get them to be a little less close-minded, I'll take that as a win, because they shouldn't be only having this conversation when they have a trans person in their life, because the chances of that happening, it could never happen. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't reflect and think about that. And I think that's the importance as to why you need people who don't have the experience, but who are willing to bring it to people and to talk about it and to discuss it.
Yeah. I feel like
that made a whole lot of sense.
Made a lot of sense.
I think that's also the problem with the mentality that if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. Because I have so many people saying, but I don't know any gay people. I don't know any trans people. I don't know. How do you, I mean, we're out there.
Do you know, we don't, the internet?
But I mean, even with their friends, and I say, like, how do you know? Do you know all of your friends' sexual identity? I just assume they're all straight. Well, that's probably your first problem. You just assume. So therefore, if you assume everybody is straight, you don't have any gay friends, right? So, and then that goes into, if I don't have any gay friends, this is not my fight, right? And the thing is, maybe you do have gay friends. Maybe you do even have trans friends. You just don't know it. Yes. And even if you don't, it's still your responsibility, because you are part of this society. And gay people exist, trans people exist, people with mental health issues exist. And all of that comes with its own struggles and its own emotional pain. And we are in a society that values physical pain a lot more than emotional pain. That's why, if somebody can't communicate with you because they broke their leg, of course they can't communicate. They're in pain. Mm-hmm. But if you're in emotional pain, they should still be able to communicate with you, because we don't value emotional suffering as much as physical one. And you always should be trying to improve yourself, if not even for your society, for yourself. So saying, I don't have X minority in my life, that is not an excuse not to inform yourself. Yeah. And I mean, Syn talked about when I came out to her as trans, that she Googled a lot and then she threw it out and asked me what I needed. And I think those two things, one doesn't exclude the other, right? Because it's one of the complaints that I get a lot when people come to my stream saying, I'm not LGBT, but I'm trying to learn about it. But then I ask people and they tell me to Google it. Mm-hmm. And that pisses me off, because here I am trying to learn, right? But me being trans does not give me the responsibility to teach what trans mean or what the trans experience is to the whole world. I try to do it as much as possible, but if one day I tell you, please Google it, I'm not dismissing you. What probably happened is that it's the 15th time that day that I'm answering that question. Yeah. And at a point I run out of energy. Yep. So both are important. Talk to people directly, but inform yourself as well, whether you have that minority in your life or not, because maybe one day you will. And on that day, you're going to want to help on right there and then, but you have no idea how to do it.
And I think that's the important point also, where we again come in as allies to, because I remember the first article I found was an article, I think it was the Vogue or something, which was very, very obviously written by a person not having that experience. And it's just like, I don't want these articles. I want articles written by trans people that tell me what they need. I don't being an ally doesn't mean I will overwrite your narrative. I will share your narrative so that other people can find your narrative and learn from it. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to answer that question 20 times a day.
I think especially in things like social media, this is very important because we as a society, not the LGBT community, but all of us as a society, we are getting to a point where we're demanding more of people.
True.
You know, it's not, during the Black Lives Matter, there was this, excuse me, this slogan that got a lot of attention, which is not enough to be anti-racist, or it's not enough to be non-racist. You need to be actively anti-racist.
Yeah.
You know, it's not enough to just not do anything against a minority group. You need to learn how to help, how to be active about it. Because if you are not the active aggressor, but you're still not acting when you see that aggressor, then we as a society aren't moving forward. And I think that what a lot of people took from it is, Black Lives Matter is trending. I need to post something about Black Lives Matter. Trans Awareness Day is today, so it's trending. I need to give my opinion about trans rights. But when you don't have the knowledge to give that opinion, but you feel forced to, because otherwise you're going to get called a transphobe, a racist, you make up your opinion on the spot because you want to be part of that conversation. You don't want to be accused of anything. But that's when you overwrite the narrative of that minority. And I think that's what's going wrong so often, is that people feel forced to have this opinion right here, right now, because everybody else has one. So you end up just saying something ignorant, maybe with good intention, but because it was never on your radar before, and now it is because you're being accused of being this or that, you just come up with an opinion in 5 minutes, and you overwrite the voices of people who have been going through it for decades. And I think that's where then the minorities feel, you're not helping, because instead of hearing our voice, you're making your voice louder just because you don't want to be accused of being anti-minority. And I think that is a big problem right now that's happening on social media. Everybody wants to have their voice heard so that they aren't accused of things. But there's a lot of ways to show support towards minorities without having your uninformed voice present. Amplify other people, and then go inform yourself. And later on, if you feel strongly about the subject, which I hope you do, then add your voice to it. When you are informed, when you have sufficient knowledge about what you're talking about. And a lot of people say, yeah, but I can't fight every battle, so I just fight no battles.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't expect everybody to fight for trans rights, just like I don't expect everybody to fight for gender equality or for the environment but choose one or two things that you're passionate about, inform yourself, and fight for it.
Yeah.
Because saying there's too many things going on, so I can't participate in any of them, that is not good enough anymore.
Or we participate in all of them, and what we do within those ones becomes ineffective because we don't have the capacity to do it well. And this expression I use is like, not all activism is good activism. Not all mental health awareness is good mental health awareness. And if we are rushing to that activism without knowing the full story, or if we are going and doing that activism with the absolute dregs of the energy that we've got left, it's probably not going to be effective. And ultimately, what we're after with activism is the result of the activism. We're not after activism for activism's sake. We're after change.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's why I also think not everything has to be a fight, and not everything has to be you're doing nothing. If the only thing you do is that you actively work on yourself and improving these things, then you have contributed to change. It's better than doing nothing. You don't have to go into full fight mode, scream it all over the world, and I don't know, donate to charities. if you work on changing your perspective and then maybe pass it on to your child or, I don't know, a partner, whatever, you have contributed. It might not feel like it, but you have changed something.
You want to make a real change. You don't want it. Tokenism is not a good thing, right? I mean, we see it we've been seeing it for the past decade in Hollywood movies. You put a black person, an Asian person, and a gay person. You don't need to give them voice lines. You don't need to make them relevant to the story. They're there. You've done your
diversity.
You've done your share. Exactly. Yeah. Check the boxes and move forward with a movie. And there's a lot of token activism, which is like, I made a post about Black Lives Matter. I made a post about trans rights. I made a post for gender equality. Done.
Yeah.
I didn't follow through. I didn't inform myself. I don't really care. But if somebody ever accuses me of something, I'll redirect them to this tweet. And that is
which I've got saved in my favorites.
So, making a difference. Part of it is actually caring about the topic that you're discussing.
Yeah.
And should you care? Yes. Are you forced to fight in all fronts? No, I don't do it. I can't. I try to fight for as many causes as I can. And sometimes, it's a month of this and a month of that, because I have finite energy. Everybody does. Right? But if you truly care about a topic and a fight and you follow through, that's being an ally. That's being an activist. That's being, a good friend. Mentioning it once and then never caring about the subject again because you checked the box, that's tokenism. We don't want that.
Yeah. The thing, I have a good example for that. The thing is that so many people, feminism nowadays is so often like on the same level of, you're a feminist, you must hate men. And it's like, no, it's not that. Like, you don't even have to identify as a feminist to be a feminist. You're a feminist if you are a father who loves their daughter because she's their daughter and not, who doesn't care that she's a daughter and not a son. Mm-hmm. Then congratulations, you're a feminist. It's those little things, it's those mindset changes that do so much more than a token Twitter post on Black Lives Matters, which of course can contribute to the conversation. I'm not dismissing that, but if you don't follow through with yourself and go through that mindset change for yourself, it's not a long-lasting change.
Yeah. And it comes back to what we talked about before with the fact that, someone somewhere saw a feminist that hates men and therefore now thinks that all feminists hate men. It's like, some feminists do. Some non-feminists also hate men. Some men hate men. Some people hate people. Some people prefer dogs to cats, others prefer dogs to humans. I personally prefer humans to dogs. Doesn't make me any different. I love my dog to pieces, but I'm team human. But it's but that's the whole thing. Is like we're different within our own little subcultures. It's an entire culture.
Yeah, and the thing is, the thing that I think I'm trying to say is, it's not the word. But it's not the word ally, it's not the word trans, it's not the word feminist. It is the concept behind it, mm-hmm. and what you do with it every single day.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want. If you do good every day, then congratulations, you're an activist.
Love it. That was one of the questions from chat so far.
Sorry.
It's cool. I enjoyed it.
Everyone, make sure to stay hydrated.
Yeah, I'm kind of out at this point. I've been making this much was the first sort of hour, and then that much has been the second hour. But Maggie says, for Emma, how was the support from your family? How did they get affected by your decision? Were they supportive, or was there some resistance or anything like that? Okay,
so I have kind of two families: the Portuguese family, and my family here, my wife, my son, my in-laws, my brother-in-law. So obviously one of the first people I told was my wife. And I was a bit worried about it because I had come out to her as agender, as I was identifying as. And I still had that barrier within myself that's saying, I chose the label, I need to keep with it, because otherwise I'm invalidating myself, which, by the way, is not a thing. Please, if you find a better label that suits you better, change labels, throw labels away. Labels aren't there to put you in a box, to validate you. They're there to help you find yourself. So if you're ever with a label that doesn't fit you anymore, discard it. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So it turned out to be a very unfounded worry, because my wife actually reacted to it quite well, even more so than when I came out as a gender to her. And she was super positive. She was like, okay, so does that mean that you're going to change name? Should we go buy you new clothes? Or, she was all excited about it. It was lovely.
Awesome.
Actually, the name Emma was suggested by her because that was the name that I chose for our kid when she was pregnant. So if we had had a girl, of course, you never know the gender of the kid until the kid tells you. But if we had a girl, we would call her Emma. And I remember thinking, oh wow, but then if I have a girl, the name's going to be taken, which was weird because I had no other use for the name. But it's one of those small things that makes sense now. I really liked the name, and I wanted it for myself, even though I was choosing it for the kid. So then when I came out to my wife, she's like, why don't you use the name now? So that's how I came to choose the name Emma. My son was amazing. He's very open-minded. I had like this whole speech prepared to give him, but I decided, let me just be blunt and then let him ask the questions. And he was very, very accepting of it. I mean, he had some concerns like, is the transition going to hurt, or are you going to be a different person? Are you going to not love me anymore? So there was all of these. He's 5, by the way. So once those questions was asked, he's like, okay, fine. And it was never really a problem. With my in-laws, it's been a bit more difficult. They're accept me, but they still misgender me and dead name me often because it's not. By the way, for those of you who don't know, that naming is the use of my old name. So it's still a bit of a struggle. For my family in Portugal, I don't have contact with my parents for obvious reasons. But they would not be accepting of it at all. I did tell my sister. She was surprisingly quite accepting of it. And for the rest, I'm out to my community. We recently moved to like a closed community. We all know each other, which is kind of weird for me now because I have so many neighbors and I know all their stories and everything. So I decided to come out to them. Everybody was very accepting, if not very tactical with the questions, but that's a different subject. So overall, it's been a very, very positive experience. For the rest, most of the problems I've encountered have been on Twitch, not from my community, but from other communities. Because as you can imagine, when I join a community, I don't go like, "Hey, I'm a trans woman. Hi." So I'm just Emma, and with the name come a lot of assumptions. And then when people when I get a shout out, especially from other streamers, I get a lot of angry messages from people because I'm not exactly what they assumed that I was. And with that comes a lot of problems. But with family and friends and acquaintances, it has been quite nice. I actually now gained the courage to answer the phone as Emma and introduce myself to people as Emma. No explanations. If they have questions, they can ask. Of course, every time I'm giving my name, they ask me if I meant Herman. No, I didn't. But But it's kind of given me that confidence to to be myself and to be proud of who I am. And I know this probably sounds a bit callous, and I don't mean it like that, but I'm not really worried with what their reaction is, because I less and less need their validation, because I validate myself now.
Doesn't sound callous at all. It sounds awesome.
So
very healthy.
Yeah. It sounds healthy. Yeah. Amazing. Siggy said to Syn, how do you pick up that torch of being an ally?
It kind of depends usually in what context it is, and also kind of what the person, it circles all back again to what the person needs. I mean, sometimes I think Emma just needs me to tell her, yeah, I get it. It sucks. It's shitty. But then on other days, I will just, I don't know, I will share thoughts on Twitter, make a post about something that bothers me. Also in the community, speak up on topics that I feel are going in the wrong direction. I think it's also always what you're comfortable with, because what you need to be aware of that when you put yourself in that spot of speaking about things like that, you make yourself open to discussions that are sometimes not nice. We all know that, I think.
Yep.
Just because of the nature of the topic. So if you're not like willing to do that, that is totally fine too. But then I'm just like, well, offer support, take up the torch and be like, can I make you feel better? What can I do to make you feel better? Do you want to watch a movie? Do you want to hang out? Do you want to call? Do you want me to send you cute cat photos? I don't know, whatever. Just, it's the little things, I guess. It doesn't always have to be this grand gesture.
Yeah.
On that topic, I think one of the things that Syn does the best is something that she doesn't even realize it. I mean, when I came out to her, she was very accepting. She quickly made me realize that she does see me as a woman, which is obviously something that even people who are accepting have trouble with sometimes. But one of the things that she does wonderfully, and it does wonders for my self-esteem, is that I don't feel like I'm her trans friend. I'm just her friend. And that is so validating and so wonderfully, and she does it so well that means a lot. I don't know what
I'm doing. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's good for people to see that not everything is made and is done intentionally, right?
No, absolutely
and I mean, mostly from the people that I've been talking about, LGBT people and people with mental health situations, people just want to be treated as people. You know, they don't want to be your bipolar friend. They don't want to be your gay friend. They don't want to be your trans friend. They want to be your friends. They want to talk to you. They want to be respected and spoke to normally, because, you know, everybody is different and nobody is normal, right? There's no place where you have to be in order to be a normal person. We're all different. So just treat people like people. I think that's the main
that's a good
the main thing that Syn helps me a lot with. She doesn't treat me any different than before I came out to her. Yes, I do talk to her about more specific transition stuff and transphobia stuff than I used to, but I'm still her friend, and that's what we want. And she does that perfectly, and I'm very grateful for it.
And it's that same thing, isn't it? If we're talking about the topic of being trans and coming out of trans here, but if a friend was to be struggling with any other area of their life that you don't understand, we'd just be there for them and treat them like a person, treat them like a human, and we'd instinctively know how to do that. And again, it's almost common sense and a little bit too obvious that it's like, okay, I don't know anything about this problem, but I'm just going to be there for you. How can I be there for you in this problem? we don't need to know everything about every single person's problems, because if we could only ever empathize with things that we've literally been through. And even then, that only goes so far, because any situation you go through, there's a million different variations of that situation again. So when you said earlier about there was again people being there was a comment a moment ago about comments being intentional or ignorant, and there's a really great question relating to that actually, which is to Emma, with the in-laws when they dead name and misgender you, do you think, is it intentional or is it just because force of habit they're not used to it?
I mean, I don't think that that's intentional, but I do feel like they are having trouble with the acceptance part. Not because they don't want me to be happy or they don't care about me, but it's just something so new to them. You know, it's kind of like that story when your kid comes out to you as gay and the parents tell them, you know, it's a phase, you'll grow out of it. So I'm not going to believe this until you know, are like this for a prolonged amount of time, because that will confirm to me that it's not just a phase. So it kind of feels like my in-laws are still in kind of that moment. And I mean, sometimes it hurts. I'm not going to lie, especially when my in-laws talk about to my kid about his father. And even if he corrects, it's like, it's mom. And my wife says, you know, it's Emma, and they still keep going.
I love that.
Like they cannot filter the information, because they have it's what we were discussing earlier. You have that confirmation of information, and you when you feel like you're in the truth, you can't receive new information that discredits that or that changes that core belief that you have. Yeah. And I mean, I did not have this prolonged discussion with my in-laws about you know what it means to be trans or what their beliefs are. It's also a bit of a language barrier, because you know I've moved here 10 years ago to the Netherlands. They don't speak much English. I can speak Dutch, but when it gets technical, I have a vocabulary problem. So it makes it difficult to have that.
Dutch is a tricky one. None of it sounds like how it's spelt. Like when I use Google Translate on other things, I can usually have a good guess and get somewhere in the right region. And people go, "Oh, the pronunciation was okay." Whereas with Dutch, it's like it's nothing like what's written on the paper. Yeah.
One of the most beautiful things that I saw was when a while ago, Emma had a stream with Logan on, and they were playing Minecraft. And like the way and I think this is where we can really learn from kids. Because kids have this open mind and they don't care about boxes and labels, and they're just, okay, it's like that now, I don't care. And the way Logan was just, without fault, every time effortlessly calling Emma mom, it was the most amazing thing.
Especially because I've came out to the community in October. But I talked to my son in December, so it's even a shorter period of time, and he's just it's what it is. It's the new reality.
Yeah, and I really wish more adults could do that too.
There's this little story that I tell in my community about me watching a TV show with him when he was 3.5, I think. We were watching She-Ra, the new show. It's an amazing show, by the way. Watch it with your kids. Very, very fun and open. And there's this story of one of the main character kids. He has 2 dads, and he's kind of unsure what their friends are going to react, how they're going to react. So he keeps it a secret. So there's this episode where the friends snoop and figure out that he has 2 dads. And I was like, great, this is a great opportunity to talk to my kid about LGBT and being gay, and, you know, and I had this whole speech prepared, and I was like, okay, he's going to ask me, and then I'm going to say this and that. And at a point he goes like, are they married? I was like, this is my chance. I'm going to do it. I have the speech prepared. I was like, yes, they are. Oh, I didn't know that 2 men could be married. Yes, they can. I was like, this is my moment. I'm going to have my first LGBT conversation with my kid. And he goes like, oh, that's great, because they love each other so much. I think that I'm really happy that they can be together. I was like, God damn it, kid! I had a whole speech prepared and you just ruined it.
I mean, I feel sorry that you didn't get to use your speech because,
right?
but at the same time, I feel excited that was his response. I feel
beautiful.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. It's like I love the fact that my 14-year-old was, when I did a makeup stream, and it was a challenge. It was we did a community challenge. We would 100,000 channel points over a month, and I'll do a makeup stream. I've still got me purple lipstick literally right there. And it was funny because I think my kids are on this age where my eldest has just turned 16. He was 15 at the time, and he's at that point where he knows some of his friends watch this. So it was very much why are you doing this? Whereas the younger one, who's 2 years younger, was just like, you look very beautiful, Dad. and he came in the other day and he said, I saw you with your Craylo on, which is my halo, half crown, half Craylo. He's like, I saw you with your Craylo on the other day. It's very beautiful. I'm just like, yes. But then that's the son that watches She-Ra and Steven Universe, and and the older one watches The Dark Knight. But I remember obviously being, when I said my dad did this show called Legends, and he would dress up as various legends like Elvis and Roy Orbison and that kind of thing, sort of Buddy Holly. And then my stepmom said to him one day, why don't you throw some female legends in there? And then obviously my dad went on to throw Tina Turner in there. I'm so glad he didn't do blackface, because it totally would have been he'd probably got away with it at the time. I'm so glad he didn't though. But he was doing that, and I remember at the time, being roughly that age that my older son was, and it was like, yeah, it's like I don't have a problem with it, but I'm worried about what my friends are going to say about it, and I hope none of them. And I didn't have social media and stuff back then, but I was living in that fear that my friends were going to kind of find and then tease me about it. And so it's really reassuring to know that the younger generations now are actually they're the ones that are probably going to be schooling us and being this is just normal. That is it. That's the normalization.
And they're so active about it. They speak about it so openly, and they don't have a problem in starting the dialogue. And I mean, I was the other day I was in picking Logan up from school, my 5-year-old, and that was an English couple, and they were talking about us. And it's like, look at that kid playing with his dad, so happy. And because Logan is trilingual, we speak Dutch, English, and Portuguese.
Logan's basically a legend.
Yes, he is.
I kind of make a bit of a face because, being called dad is kind of, I understand it, but it still kind of sucks. And Logan's like, don't worry, I got this. And he walks over to the couple and it's like, excuse me, but it's my mom. She's a translator, and I'm like, transgender.
Translator.
You got the trans part right, but
that is priceless. That is
I love Logan so much.
That is absolutely amazing. Oh my god. The chat's lost it a little bit on that one. Rightly
but
so.
I love that confidence that he's just like, I'm gonna walk up there. I got this. Don't worry, Mom. I got this.
I see it more and more on kids, the not standing up for injustices. As I grew up, as kids, you were told to stay out of things, right? And kids nowadays are I see something I don't like. I see somebody getting hurt. I see somebody being insulted. I'm going to get in there. Yeah. And I love how proactive kids are about that kind of stuff now. And I hope that that keeps going like that, because that's what we need.
Yeah, the way I see this is that, and this is why I'm so keen on getting kids to talk. You know what we talked about before about you'd never talk to yourself you'd never talk to a friend how you talk to yourself, right? I'm so keen on getting kids to talk to themselves how they would to a friend, and because one of the things with adults is it's not the fact that we can't learn, it's the fact that we have to unlearn. Like, we have to unlearn something that has become pattern, has become unconsciously competent. You know, we've basically got to the point where we can do it without even thinking. The neurons are firing, whereas kids haven't got to that stage yet. Like, they've not got to the stage where any, like, racism is internalized, or homophobia or transphobia are internalized. And I remember when I was taught this one story back when I was I must have been in primary school, so I must have been like 10 or 11, and it's always stuck with me. When it was this story about how a child came home to the parents and described the friend that they'd met that day. And it was like, oh, you know, he had brown hair, he was tall, he wore a red shirt, whatever. He was funny, and then the parent takes the child to school the next day with the child and goes, oh, which one's your new friend? And he points to his new friend, and the parent goes, oh, you mean the black kid? And it's like, that's the thing, is that the color of the other child's skin was never a relevant part of that conversation. Like, the same as the color of like someone's hair might not be, or the color, like, I mean, I know I just mentioned things like the top that the person was wearing that day or whatever, but like, you know, if someone said to me, like, how was the conversation with Syn and Emma, I wouldn't be like, yeah, it was good. They were both, I mean, you're both wearing black tops, right? I'm paying attention now. But it's like, yeah, it's great. They were both wearing black tops. But it's like, I'd be talking about the qualities of the conversation and how we got along and all that type of thing. And it's when it comes to, let's use what you said before about when you're giving yourself that compliment and you had to fake it till you make it, right? If you'd have been giving yourself those compliments your entire life, that would have been the language that you speak. Whereas, you know, as someone who is trilingual, it's like, it's no amount of learning English makes you ready to speak Portuguese. It's, you know, it's no amount of learning Japanese makes you ready to speak French. You know, it's like it. And the problem is, no amount of talking bad to yourself makes you ready for talking good to yourself. And when you do, if you've never known any different, it'll feel perfectly natural to talk good to yourself. But if you've spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your life talking down to yourself, talking badly to yourself, the first time you give yourself a compliment, it's going to feel like this unnatural alien thing from a different language, a different planet maybe, and it'll feel wrong. But only because you've got the same as naming, right? As when you have called someone by a certain name for their entire time, and then they want to, and the first time you say the new name, it doesn't click in the person's head. And the analogy I say for this is, if you continue to use the person's new name, it will get easier and easier for you because it will click easier and easier. If you continue to use the person's old name or dead name, it will get harder and harder for that person. It's like, so come on, like it's okay if you've not got it straight away. If your brain immediately wants to go to this, you know, there's another streamer who thinks my name's Mike, even though my channel's got my actual name in it, and it's fine but he's called me that a bunch of times, and it's The funny one I always find is, like, if someone's saying, you know, we talked about what to do versus what not to do earlier. If you say don't, it's like don't call her Gemma, don't call her Gemma, don't call her Gemma, don't call her Gemma, don't call her Gemma. And I've just practiced the name Gemma in my head like 56 times. So then when you come on camera, I'm like, hey Gemma, how's it going? It's like, no, that's exactly what you were supposed not to do. Practice, like, instead of saying like don't call her or don't call them and then use the wrong pronouns, instead of constantly repeating that in your head, a little mindset trick, repeat the actual ones you want to say, and now you've got a bunch of practicing.
Because if you focus on the fear is what you're going to get.
Absolutely. Is there anything else either of you want to add that we've not kind of got into?
I wanted to quickly touch on something that I think it's important that we haven't talked about.
Okay.
It's okay to be struggling with new things, and that's kind of what Dave was saying right now. And one of the most beautiful conversations I ever had on stream was from a guy who came in and said, I am a homophobe, but I don't want to be. And that was, that kind of made me all tear-eyed from the beginning, It's of course, being a racist, being a homophobe, being a transphobe is not a good thing. We know this. But if you honestly don't want to be anymore, you're on the right track and it's fine, right? I was raised as racist and homophobe as well, because not even transphobe, because my family didn't know anything past gays. It was the gays, capital T, capital G. It's the gays. I think if we ever told them there's an LGBT, they would just go in paranoid, because now they're organized. So of course, I was told all the stereotypes that Black people are prone to violence and stupid and dangerous, and that gay people were sinners who are going to burn in hell. And, I think my family believed that if a gay touched you, then you would become gay. So, it was all sorts of stupid shit, right? As soon as I started going to school and I met Black kids, I met gay kids, they were lovely. I made friends with them. And then I thought, that's it. I'm not racist and I'm not a homophobe anymore. I am done. Great job, me. I have a Black friend. I have a gay friend.
You tick the boxes.
Right? Tick the boxes. I'm done with this. But so for a period of 10 years, I would still catch myself having racist and homophobic thoughts, right? I would say things like, when the topic of gay marriage came up, yes, of course they should be able to get married. I'm not homophobic. They should be able to get married. Probably just not adopt. Or is like, well, of course you should be able to be gay. I just hope that if I ever have a son, he's not gay. And every time I had those thoughts, I was like, fuck, back to the drawing board, because this is not okay. And it was such a big process. Same with racism. It's like, I have a Black friend. He's great. So I'm not racist anymore. And then if I was walking outside at night and there was a white guy behind me, I would be perfectly fine. If it was a Black guy behind me, I would look back every 5 seconds just to make sure he wasn't getting closer to me. So it's insidious.
Yeah.
And it's internalized, and that is
exactly. And it's not something that you stop being from one minute to the other. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of you stopping yourself and saying, I'm still not there. And
you will mess up.
You will mess up. And if there's any message that I want you to take from this, is that it's okay not to be there yet.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay for you not to be at the end of your journey. You're never going to be at the end of your journey. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be there yet. Yeah. And that goes for racism, homophobia, transphobia, even on smaller scale things like misgendering people. I don't speak much Portuguese anymore. I speak English, I speak Dutch. When I speak in Portuguese, I misgender myself, because in Portuguese, we change the sentence according to your gender.
Yeah.
So as a man, you end most words with an O. As a woman, you end most words with an A. And for 26 years, I ended everything with an O.
Yep.
So now when I go back to speaking Portuguese, guess what I do? It's not because I don't know my own gender. It's because I've done it for 26 years and I have zero experience of otherwise. Things are going to happen. You make mistakes. Apologize. Be willing to be corrected. Do better next time, right? Try again, fail better. If you know that
forward.
Quote. So, it's okay. All of this is okay.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're trying is the most important thing.
Did I get that right? Obrigado.
You did. Nice.
I think I definitely said that in the wrong gender when I went to Portugal. Actually, I'm going to Portugal in like 6 weeks or something, 7 weeks. It got put on the green list yesterday and my wife booked flights within about 20 minutes. I've never seen her do anything so fast in my entire life. She's like, can you check these dates? And I'm just like, I've got nothing that far in advance. But awesome. Syn, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Not really. I think what Emma just said, it's just such a good summary. You're not going to be perfect from day one. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. But just don't stop working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes back to one kind of, again, another human condition is we don't like, especially we don't like to do things publicly that we're not great at. And so if we're not perfect, there's I say very old, it's like 9 months old, but in YouTube that's ancient now. There's an old video of mine saying that's basically just called "But What If I Suck," and how like fear of being bad at things is one of the big things that stops people from getting good at them, and that. The video is not about correctly gendering people. The video is about, playing tennis or whatever. It's about, but the same principle applies, is like if we fear that we're going to say the wrong thing in a conversation, we'll avoid the conversation and then we'll never practice saying the right thing or finding out even what the right thing is. If we fear having conversations and learning about people, we're never going to actually get closer to completely and utterly destroying our internal racism and homophobia. And it's like there is something, and I'll try and find it and put in the link when this goes on YouTube. But I've been listening to the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about the racism test. And his mother's Jamaican, so he is mixed race, but even he fails this test, like which kind of like basically with a bunch of word association. If you do a bunch of word association, where you've got to put positive words, if you've got to basically sort positive words or white, European American faces in one category, and negative words and African Americans in another category. And then you reverse the test and you basically have to do the negative words with the white people and the positive words with the black people. And when you've done at the end of it, by the different, it shows you where your bias lies. And these biases, again, there is a very big difference between being unconsciously racist or unconsciously homophobic and unconsciously transphobic, where those actual internalized racisms or like things happen, like what Emma was saying a moment ago. If a white person's walking behind her, don't look over the shoulder every 5 seconds. Again, you're not deliberately doing that. It's unconscious and it's there. But it's I want to actually take this test to just see how bad mine is, or how good it is. It could be positive. It could be great. But I know myself that there has been within my life. There has been times that I've seen a person of color, or I've seen a person that this is historically not even obviously openly identified as gay or part of the LGBT community, but was, dressed in accordance or presented in accordance to that. And I've felt those split-second decisions, those split-second kind of like stereotypes and things happen in my mind. And I address the fact that's there, which is why I smiled so much when you said that person said, I'm homophobic. That's afraid of homeless people. I'm homophobic. Words don't sound like words anymore. I'm seriously dehydrated.
Oh, I like it.
But yeah, that person who said I'm homophobic and I'd like to not be. And that's amazing. That's amazing because, again, I think we've all got, to one degree or another, a bias there. And trying to claim that that's not there, you're never going to get past it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have this very stupid story from my high school years, but it's one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned. Next to our school, there was an arcade. All of us would just meet at the arcade at lunch, right? And there was this one kid, and he was always stopping by a specific arcade. And he said, I love this game. And I said, I have never seen you play it. It's I'm learning first. I'm watching others playing and I'm going to be really good at this game and then I'm going to play it. And he had this coin, right? And for 4 years, he held on to that coin because he didn't feel like, he was good enough at the game to spend that money. We graduated. He never used that coin because he never tried it. He was never going to be good enough without ever trying it. He was just trying to be good enough without walking the walk, and that's never going to happen. So on the bright side, he saved some money. On the other side, he spent 4 years being afraid of not being good enough, and that fear prevented him from ever getting better at it. So if you don't play the game, you're not going to get better at the game. That's life. If you're too afraid of trying something because you're not going to be good enough, you're never going to be good enough at it.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're afraid of it, you won't put the work in to get better. And if you don't put the work in to get better, you're not going to get better. Where's the best place for people to find you if they want to interact with you online?
I mean, like I wrote on chat that I've been reading chat, but I can't answer everything here. So people can always DM me. They can find me on my streams. I stream Wednesday, Thursdays, Friday, and Saturday. The beginning part of the stream, sometimes it's 1 hour, sometimes it's the whole 6 hours, is chatting with people, answering questions. We talk a lot about mental illness. We talk about mental health in general, LGBT normalization, and it's a non-judgmental place. You can use whatever phrasing you want. Do your best, just as long as you're respectful. We answer everything. I have absolutely no barriers to what I answer, except if it's personal information about my wife or son. I will not do that because it's not my story to tell. If it's questions about me or things that I can help you with, please come join us. Ask away. We had so many people who said, I first came out in your community and things have been changing so much. That makes me feel so valid and so rewarded. It's amazing. And through this year that I've been streaming, we've been getting more and more people that are very passionate about these discussions. We have all sorts of people from all walks of life. So we have some very important discussions there. Of course, they only clip the parts where I say something that sounds lewd, but the discussions are important, and I would love to see you there.
Amazing. I just try to be super technical. Mounty, don't do the shout out for Syn just yet, because I've realized that Twitch Guru's still playing somewhere. So I'm like, why can I hear a third voice? And then I realized that I could actually hear you twice, Emma. And then it's like, it's because I've just given you a shout out, and therefore there's Twitch Guru's playing somewhere. It shouldn't be, because it's not on this scene. That's bizarre.
Mysterious third voice.
Okay, I can't even find it to shut it off because it's.
I mean, you're not a pro streamer if you don't have technical problems at least once per stream, right?
So I'm told, but that sounds like gatekeeping. Because I've had streams without technical problems, and I identify as a.
I'm so jealous.
I don't know how. Yeah, it's they usually actually I say that the Thursday one's only an hour, so there's not as much time for. There's not much time. How about you, Syn? Where's the best place to find and get in touch with you?
Yeah, basically the same. So you can find me on Twitch and on Twitter. The only thing that I have at the moment is a little bit of a restriction that my DMs from people who don't know me are closed. So best way would probably be to pop into stream and say, hi, can I talk to you? And then I will message you and we can open that conversation. But yeah, it was a lengthy issue with some people not knowing how to decent human being. So we had to take some precautions there. If you want, we also have a Discord where we do lots of hanging out, also lots of talking about serious and not so serious things. And yeah, I don't do as much just chatting as Emma, but what you'll find with me on my Twitch channel is I'll try to do a lot of mental health and general social issue discussions, and try to embed them into games. So I will actively play games that touch upon sensitive topics and then talk about them. For example, we played Hellblade for World Suicide Day. So we do things like that. We play indie games that focus on feminism, discuss it, have those conversations. It's always a lot of fun. And yeah, nice. Damn trolls. See, damn trolls.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining me this evening and for being so generous with your time as well. We've went over by like a little bit, like I don't know, like 90 minutes or something. I don't know. How long has it been actually? What time is it? It's nearly 10. We started at 7. Yeah, it's only been 90 minutes more than I said I'd keep you for. That's fine. I mean, we did say I think when we talked the first time that it could go long, and I think it needed to. So, but thank you both so much for.
But we didn't cry.
I think I'm broken. I think having the tissues ready is like the number one barrier to ever crying. I've cried significantly less since I bought that box of tissues. Like and it used to be like a once a week on stream thing. I think
it's a psychological thing, right? Because just looking at the tissues means that you're allowing yourself to cry, which means that your emotions flow a lot more freely. Yeah. So you don't break down as often.
I was trying to actually explain this to another streamer called Beat Cleaver, who's amazing, this morning because he was playing at a festival. He's a beatbox, and he was playing at a festival this morning, and he said, it's basically when he really needs to sleep, that's when insomnia comes along. And I said, it's called paradoxical. Yeah, it's called paradoxical intent. It's the entire purpose of the Frankie Goes to Hollywood song, Relax. Relax, don't do it when you want to. And it's the thing is, the more you strive for something, sometimes the harder it becomes. So I used to find that because my wife was, we do say that I'm the woman in the relationship and she's the man if we're going by stereotypical kind of feminine qualities and masculine qualities. Because I'm the more sensitive one and all the rest of it. And it used to be a thing that if she'd ever say to me, "Don't cry," like that'd make me cry faster. And I kind of eventually we had that communication probably about 6 years into the relationship, which is about 5 years, 364 days too late, but hey ho. And we had that thing, and I said, look, when you say don't cry to me, it makes me feel like my emotions are invalidated. It makes me feel like you're not. And I said, so like, can you let me have permission to cry if that is, because it makes me feel worse. It makes me kind of, and she was like, yeah, no problem. And basically then from now on she goes, she's like, okay, you can cry if you want. And I'm like, don't want to now. It's like my tear ducts have literally been like, my tear ducts are rebellious teenagers. So there we go. We just had a raid come in. Oh my God. Hello, Lord Beam. Oh, Lord Beerman, you make me want beer again now.
Shit, that scared me.
Now I can hear it. Like, see, I can hear it. There's nothing on screen. But thank you very much, Lord Beerman, for the raid. And we've just missed the end of an epic 2.5 hour interview. Which we are literally just kind of signing off from. So thank you very much we can all hear. I know you can all hear it. If I can hear it, you can hear it, because my super sophisticated output is whatever I can hear. There's two main outputs that are sent to the stream. One of them is my voice, and the other one is whatever I can hear. That's about as complicated. That's probably maybe why I don't have so many tech issues until right now. But yeah, so thank you again. It's been absolutely amazing, and I hope we can do this again sometime. I'll have a more specific direction probably when we do, because I think that it helped having a bit of structure at the beginning. But and if there is ever any sort of sides of this that you think actually this is really important, just drop me a DM and I'd love to do this again sometime.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think thanks for having us as well, because this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too.
We warned you that Emma and I can talk for a long time if given a chance.
Everybody, ! Love, ! Hype, if ! Thirsty, if you want some thirsties but worthies up there. Let's have a bit of love, a hype up in the chat for Syn and Emma. It's been absolutely amazing.
And for the chat as well. Chat has been lovely.
Yeah.
They have.
Everyone.
Awesome chat.
That's why, as I said at the beginning, we don't usually have to tell anyone to play nice, because we shouldn't need to really. But trolls are real and they are everywhere. All right, everybody. I'm going to go to a Be Right Back screen.